I don't know why that line keeps replaying in my head. I dismissed my husband's efforts. She said it once, almost like she was talking to herself, but it lodged somewhere in me. Maybe because the way she said it didn't sound like confession or anger. It sounded tired, like she had practiced being strong so long she forgot what it felt like to be soft. I work at a small neighborhood repair shop, the kind with greasy coffee in the back and shelves stacked too close together. I've been here 2 years, fixing things people think are broken beyond saving. Laptops, old radios, even someone's vintage sewing machine once. I like the quiet of it, the rhythm of screws and wires, the smell of solder. That morning, she walked in carrying a lamp. It was brass, heavy, and oddly elegant compared to the cracked plastic items that usually end up on my counter. She placed it down like it had weight beyond metal. "This still has to work," she murmured, not really looking at me. Her voice was low, careful. I asked the usual questions: when it broke, if it flickered, if the wiring seemed loose. She nodded, distracted, her fingers brushing the rim of the lamp again and again as if it might vanish if she let go. When she finally looked up, I noticed the small things first, the faint lines at the corners of her eyes, the way her hair was pulled back but a strand kept escaping, falling against her cheek. There was confidence in her posture, straight, deliberate, but her eyes had something else, like she was holding her breath in a room no one else noticed. "I'll take a look," I said. She thanked me too quickly, then stood there as if she wasn't ready to leave. Customers usually drop things off and hurry out, but she lingered, scanning the shelves filled with half-mended things. Her hand hovered over a broken radio, and she gave a half-smile. "My husband used to fix things," she said, softer now. Then, almost to herself, or at least he tried. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't. I just bent over the lamp, pretending the wires were more complicated than they were. Still, I felt her eyes on me, curious, maybe a little restless. At one point, the silence stretched too long. I looked up, and she looked away a second too late. The air between us shifted. It wasn't flirtation, not even close, but something passed through that pause. Recognition, maybe, or loneliness dressed as small talk. The bulb flickered back to life under my hands. She exhaled as if she hadn't realized she was holding her breath. "That's better than I expected," she said, and for the first time, she smiled. Not wide, not bright, but real. The kind of smile that makes you want to see it again. When she reached for the lamp, her fingers brushed mine. Just a second, maybe less. But I noticed how quickly she pulled back, how she tightened her grip on the handle, steadying herself as though it revealed too much. She thanked me again, softer this time, and left. The bell over the shop door rang. Then the silence folded back in. I went back to my workbench, but the moment clung to me. The flicker of her eyes, the sound of her voice when it dipped into something unguarded, the way her hand trembled before she pulled it away. I don't know why I keep thinking about it, but I do. And it feels like the start of something I'm not supposed to name. She came back a week later, not with another broken lamp, but with her son's old laptop. The screen had cracked down the middle like a spider web, half-lit, stubbornly flickering. She carried it in her arms the way some people carry boxes of old photographs, too gently for something replaceable. I wiped my hands on a rag as she set it on the counter. "Doesn't have to be perfect," she said, brushing dust off the lid. "Just usable." Her tone was clipped, efficient, but her fingers lingered longer than her words suggested. I nodded, taking the machine apart piece by piece, careful not to let the silence feel heavy. She didn't leave this time either. Instead, she leaned against the counter, arms folded, eyes scanning the cluttered bulletin board behind me. "People still fix these?" she asked, gesturing toward the shelves stacked with half-repaired relics. "Not everyone believes in throwing things out," I said without looking up. Her laugh came quick, sharp, and then dissolved into something softer. "Wish I had your patience." I looked at her then. She wasn't wearing the same careful mask as before. Her eyes looked tired, rimmed with a shadow that makeup couldn't quite hide. The kind of tired that wasn't about sleep. "Patience isn't free," I said before I could stop myself. She tilted her head, considering that. For a moment, she almost smiled. Almost. Then it was gone, folded back into the guarded lines of her face. The laptop resisted my hands for a while, and she filled the silence with small details, half-finished sentences about her son leaving things lying around, how her kitchen light had started to flicker again. Each word seemed to test the air before being allowed out. I listened more than I answered. That seemed to matter. At one point, she rubbed her temple with 2 fingers, eyes closing briefly. Just a small gesture, but I noticed the way her shoulders slumped for half a second, the armor slipping. She caught herself and straightened quickly, but the image stayed with me. A glimpse of something unguarded, something fragile she hadn't meant to show. I wanted to ask if she was okay, but the word stuck. Instead, I offered her the seat behind the counter. She hesitated, then shook her head. If I sit, I won't get back up. It was meant as a joke, but her voice cracked on the last word. I didn't push. I just went back to the laptop, letting the hum of tools and faint static fill the gap. When I finally powered it on, the screen glowed steady, unbroken. She leaned closer, and for a second, the distance between us collapsed. Her perfume faint but unmistakable, her sleeve brushing my arm. Usable, I said quietly. She looked at me, and something in her expression shifted. Gratitude, maybe, or the ache of being seen when you weren't expecting it. Thank you, she whispered, softer than before. Her hand rested on the laptop, but she didn't move to take it right away. Neither of us did. The silence between us wasn't empty anymore. It hummed, alive, like the faint buzz of a newly mended screen. And I knew I'd carry that silence with me, long after she walked out the door. The second time I saw her, it wasn't in the shop. It was in the back hallway of the library across the street, where I'd been called to fix the staff printer that refused to cooperate. The kind of repair no one cared about until paperwork stacked high enough to block sunlight. She was there, leaning against a cart of returned books. She looked different outside the frame of the repair counter. Not just a customer now, but a piece of the building itself, as though she belonged in the hush of that place. She wore a gray cardigan, sleeves pushed up, hair twisted loosely. There was a pen tucked behind her ear, and ink smudges on her fingertips. "Of course it's you," she said, almost amused. "You fix everything, don't you?" I shrugged, crouching to open the stubborn printer tray. Machines don't talk back. She let out a small laugh, short, brittle at first, then breaking into something warmer. The sound surprised me. It was too alive for the tired look in her eyes. While I worked, she stayed nearby, pretending to sort books. I noticed the way her hands moved. Quick, practiced, but pausing now and then as though she forgot what she was doing. Her wedding ring caught the fluorescent light each time she reached for a spine. "You must get sick of this," she said after a while. "Fixing things no one appreciates." I shook my head. I like seeing something broken work again, even if no one notices. She was quiet at that, her fingers resting on the cover of a thick novel without turning it. A shadow passed over her face, quick, like a cloud moving. She caught herself, straightened, and tucked the book back onto the cart with more force than needed. I didn't ask. I just kept working, though every click of plastic and whir of gears seemed louder against her silence. When the printer finally sputtered to life, she stepped closer to watch. The machine hummed, paper sliding out in neat stacks. She exhaled softly, as if she'd been waiting for proof that something could still function properly. Her hand brushed the edge of the printer, fingertips grazing the warm plastic. She hesitated there, not moving. I noticed how faintly her hand trembled, barely visible, but enough to anchor my eyes. "You make it look easy," she said, her voice low now, almost tired. "It's not," I admitted. That made her look at me. Just a glance, brief but sharp, like she was searching for something in my face she couldn't quite name. The moment held longer than it should have. Too long for two people who barely knew each other. When she finally stepped back, she smoothed her cardigan and forced a small smile. "Thank you." Again, I nodded, but the weight of her gaze lingered even after she walked away. And later, when the day dimmed and the shop grew quiet, I still saw that flicker, her hand trembling over the machine, her laugh that didn't match her eyes. Small things, the kind that don't leave you alone. It was raining the third time. Not a storm, just a steady drizzle that made the shop windows blur and the streets shine like dark glass. She came in near closing, carrying nothing this time. Just herself, damp hair clinging to her forehead, her cardigan darkened at the shoulders. "You're still open," she said, almost surprised. "For a little while," I answered, setting down the screwdriver. She didn't move toward the counter. Instead, she lingered by the door, brushing water from her sleeve. Something in her posture was different, less guarded, maybe, or simply too tired to hold the guard up. I motioned toward the chair by the workbench. She hesitated, then sat. We didn't talk right away. The only sound was the ticking clock and the faint hum of the overhead light. She looked at the rows of half-repaired things, then at me. "Do you ever feel like, no matter how much you fix, something else always breaks?" she asked suddenly. Her voice was steady, but her fingers twisted together in her lap. I didn't answer quickly. The weight of the question hung between us. "Yeah," I said finally. "All the time." Her laugh was short, almost bitter. "My husband used to say he was trying. I didn't believe him. Now I don't know if he was failing, or if I just stopped noticing." She didn't look at me when she said it. Her eyes stayed on the floor, the words slipping out like a secret she hadn't meant to tell. I felt the pull to say something, to admit how much I thought about her, how her presence sat with me long after she left. But I stayed quiet. The rain grew heavier, tapping harder against the windows. She rubbed her palms against her knees as though steadying herself. "You're easy to talk to," she said suddenly, softer now. I swallowed, throat dry. "That's not something I hear often." She turned then, finally meeting my eyes. The distance across the workbench felt smaller than it was. For a moment, neither of us looked away. The air thickened, not with romance, not yet, but with the possibility of something tipping too far. I shifted in my chair, hands restless on the edge of the bench. I wanted to reach across, to steady her hands, to say she wasn't alone in what she carried. But before I could move, her phone buzzed against the wood of the table. The vibration cut the silence in half. She glanced down. The name on the screen flashed bright, and her face closed like a door. She silenced the call, slid the phone back into her bag, and forced a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "I should go? Before the rain gets worse." She stood, pulling her cardigan tighter around herself. I rose too, though I didn't know why. Habit, or something else. At the door, she paused. The rain pattered hard, the streetlights blurring in the wet glass. She looked back at me once, lips parted like she might say something more. But she didn't. She just left me standing there, my hand gripping the back of the chair she'd sat in, the warmth of her presence still pressed into the room. And I couldn't shake the thought. If that phone hadn't rung, what would she have said? She came back on a Thursday evening, later than usual. The shop was nearly empty, just the ticking of the clock and the faint buzz of the street lamp outside bleeding through the window. She didn't bring anything to fix. She just came. "I was walking by," she said, as if to explain herself. Her voice was too casual, like a cover story told at the wrong time. I nodded, moved a box aside so she had space to sit. She lowered herself onto the stool, her hands folded too tightly in her lap. The silence stretched, but neither of us filled it. I worked on an old record player just to keep my hands busy. The needle was bent, the gears stiff with dust. Still, I could feel her eyes drifting my way, then away again. After a long while, she spoke. "Do you ever wonder what people see when they look at you?" I looked up slowly. "Sometimes." Her laugh was faint, brittle. "I think I stopped being seen years ago." That landed harder than she meant it to. I didn't have an answer, not one that wouldn't sound like pity. So I set the tools down and met her gaze fully for the first time. The room thickened with quiet. She held my stare longer than she should have, her breathing unsteady. "This isn't normal," she whispered finally. "What isn't?" I asked, though I already knew. "Us." She shook her head, a dry smile breaking through. "Me. Here, talking to you about things I can't say to anyone else. You listening like it matters. It's not." She cut herself off, pressing her lips together. I leaned forward, elbows on the bench. "Then why keep coming back?" Her eyes flickered, uncertain, and for a second I thought she might stand and leave. Instead, she stayed. Her fingers tightened around each other, knuckles white. "Because it feels easier," she admitted, her voice low. And I don't know what that says about me. The words sat heavy between us. My chest felt tight, but I didn't move. I couldn't. We stared at each other, the kind of stare that holds too much and not enough all at once. Neither of us dared to reach across the space. We didn't need to. The silence carried more than touch ever could. Her eyes shone, not with tears, but with the weight of something unsaid. She swallowed hard, then whispered the line that split the air clean open. I don't even recognize myself anymore. The record player on the bench hummed faintly, the needle catching static. Outside, the streetlight flickered, and in that moment, I knew nothing between us could go back to what it was. It was quiet that evening, the kind of quiet that makes you hear your own breathing louder than it should be. She sat across from me, not like a customer anymore, not even like a visitor. Just there, as if she belonged in the space without needing a reason. Her bag rested on the counter, unzipped. A phone peeked out, screen dark. Beside it, I noticed an envelope, worn at the edges, folded too many times. She caught me glancing and slid it closer to herself, almost reflexively. You remind me of someone, she said suddenly, without looking at me. I froze, my hand stilling on the screwdriver. Someone good. Her lips twitched, as though she wasn't sure if she should smile. Someone I lost. Years ago. She traced the rim of the envelope with her fingertip. My brother. He was younger than me. Too young. I didn't move, didn't breathe too loudly. She hadn't meant to say it. I could tell by the way her voice broke halfway through. I used to dismiss him, she continued, her tone sharper now, self-punishing. Always in a rush, always telling him I didn't have time to listen. And then, when he was gone, all I could think about was the sound of his voice, asking me for something so small, and me brushing him off. Her hand trembled against the envelope. I wanted to reach across, to still it, but I didn't. That's why I can't stand broken things, she whispered. Because I couldn't fix the one thing that mattered. The shop air felt too close, too heavy. I swallowed, my throat dry. She finally looked at me then, and I saw it. The rawness she kept hidden under her steady posture, her clipped words. I shouldn't be telling you this, she said, shaking her head. You can't, I murmured. If you want. For a second, her eyes softened, like she was considering it. Then, almost as if to protect herself, she pushed the envelope back into her bag, zipped it shut, and straightened her shoulders. But something had shifted. The air between us wasn't the same. I wasn't just the boy who fixed her lamp or her printer. I was someone she had let glimpse the part of her that still bled when no one was looking. The moment held, fragile and quiet. Then she whispered, almost too softly to hear, "You even laugh like him." It shouldn't have meant as much as it did, but the words landed deep, heavier than I could explain. And though nothing in the room had moved, it felt like the ground beneath us had. It happened without a plan, without either of us naming what was building. She came late again, near closing, the street outside already empty. Her hair was damp from the night air, her cardigan loose around her shoulders. She didn't speak when she walked in, and I didn't ask why she had come. We sat across from each other, the record player between us still waiting for a part one hadn't found. My tools were scattered, but neither of us touched them. I keep thinking I should stop coming here, she said finally, her voice low, steady, almost rehearsed. Then why don't you? I asked. She didn't answer. Her hands were folded in her lap, fingers tightening, loosening, tightening again. I noticed a faint bruise near her wrist, nothing alarming, just the kind you get from carrying too much weight for too long. I don't know what this is, she admitted, but it scares me. And at the same time, her words trailed off. She shook her head, almost angry at herself. I let the silence carry. It wasn't an empty silence. It was the kind that feels heavier than words. I don't want to ruin your life, she whispered after a long pause. The sentence hit harder than I expected. Not because it was wrong, but because it was honest. She was older, married still, tied to a life I didn't fully know. I was younger, freer, maybe reckless for even letting this happen. And yet here we were, sharing the same air, unable to step away. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. You haven't ruined anything. Her eyes lifted, searching mine, waiting for me to flinch, to pull back. I didn't. The rain started again outside, soft against the window. She glanced toward it, then back at me. I feel seen here. And I don't remember the last time I felt that. The words cracked something in me. Because I felt it too. The inevitability of us. I didn't move quickly, didn't reach for her. I just let my hand rest on the table, close but not touching. She looked at it for a long moment before letting her own hand slip forward, hesitating, then finally resting over mine. The warmth of her skin was quiet, unspoken, but it said more than anything either of us could have confessed. We didn't kiss. We didn't make promises. We just sat there, her hand trembling against mine, my thumb brushing the edge of her knuckle. The silence wrapped around us like a secret we had chosen to share, one we both knew we couldn't take back. When she finally whispered, it was almost nothing, almost lost in the sound of the rain. "Don't let go yet." And I didn't. Looking back now, I realized nothing between us was ever about big gestures. No declarations, no promises carved into stone. What stayed with me were the small things. The way her hand shook before she let it rest on mine. The weight of her silence when she finally allowed herself to sit still in front of me. The tired curve of her smile that carried both regret and relief. We didn't fall into love like people think it happens. There was no rush, no spark that consumed everything at once. It was quieter, slower, almost invisible until it wasn't. It grew in glances we couldn't look away from, in conversations we both knew weren't casual anymore, in the stubborn fact that she kept coming back when she had no reason to. For me, it was the first time I learned that love doesn't have to be loud to be real. It doesn't always announce itself with certainty. Sometimes it arrives as hesitation, as guilt, as fear, and still, beneath all of that, it lives. And for her, I think she remembered what it was like to be seen. Not as a wife, not as a woman carrying regrets or disappointments, but as herself. Someone flawed, layered, alive. She once told me she didn't recognize herself anymore. But in those quiet hours in the shop, I saw her recognize pieces of who she used to be, and maybe who she still could be. We never tried to define what happened. Maybe because definitions would have broken it. It wasn't an affair, and it wasn't just friendship. It was something in between, suspended in its own fragile truth. Do I regret it? No, because what I carry with me now is proof that connection can exist even in the unlikeliest spaces between people who never expected to find it. She taught me that love can be both heavy and freeing at once. That sometimes, the most profound closeness is found in the silence you share with another person. We didn't need forever. What we had was enough. And if you're listening to this now, maybe it's because you felt something like it yourself. A moment that stayed, even when it shouldn't have. A silence that said more than words ever could. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?